Good morning, this is BBC One with breakfast.
Hello and welcome to Breakfast from BBC News with, for the very last time, Jeremy Bowen and Sophie Raworth.
It's 6 o'clock on Thursday, the 5th of September. Good morning, welcome to the programme. The headlines this morning: it's back to school after all for the teachers who've not been vetted.
The rules have been relaxed to end the chaos in the classroom.
President Bush is to ask the UN to issue an ultimatum to Iraq.
And why channel-hopping shoppers are getting the best bargains on all sorts of goods.
This morning's main business news: pressure mounts on the Bank of England to drop interest rates below 4%.
And in sport, England expects, can Nasser Hussain lead his men to a series victory in the final test against India?
Coming up, we're talking to John Nichol, the Gulf War veteran who was captured by the Iraqis a decade ago, about what he thinks of the prospect of war this time around.
Right now, though, Kate Sanderson with this morning's main news. Hello, Kate.
Hello, good morning. Schools in England and Wales will be trying to contact staff today to tell them to come into work, even though security checks on their background aren't complete. More than 7,000 checks still have to be carried out by the Criminal Records Bureau. But last night, the Education Secretary, Estelle Morris, changed her mind about the enforcement of the vetting policy because of the disruption it's causing.
Better late than never. Sisters Poppy and Emma can now start school. Both had been forced to stay at home because checks on staff at their West London school weren't complete. Now the government's reversed its policy so their teachers can work before being fully vetted.
Yeah, I was a bit let down that, I couldn't see my friends again. I wanted to find out what they'd done on the holidays and what they'd had fun and where they'd been.
At first it's sort of really exciting that you're off, and then the novelty sort of wears off and you don't have many things to do, so you just sort of sit around.
Some classrooms have been empty for days. The government insisting unchecked staff shouldn't work with children. But disruption became crisis, affecting thousands of pupils. When the Criminal Records Bureau admitted it couldn't clear the backlog, the Education Secretary decided to abandon her policy so teachers could start while the checks are being processed.
What we have to do now is use this as an opportunity to get the system right, because in the end it's going to be a better system, but it's got to be set up properly and it's got to be staffed properly, and you've got to actually trust the people who are doing it are going to give you the full facts.
Some pupils affected may go back today, but it'll take a while to contact all parents. By Friday, schools hope it'll at last be business as usual after a difficult start to term. James Westhead, BBC News.
President Bush has signalled he would be prepared to back a United Nations ultimatum to force Saddam Hussein to accept weapons inspectors or face war. Here, pressure is growing for the recall of Parliament as Tony Blair prepares to meet George Bush at Camp David this weekend. And a member of Mr Blair's cabinet has again made it clear she's uncomfortable with current developments.
Tony Blair is a man on a mission. For weeks he said nothing on Iraq. Now his critics can barely keep up with the pace of developments. The Prime Minister denies his meeting with George Bush this weekend will amount to a council of war. But how to tackle Saddam Hussein is top of the agenda. And they will be talking about who should govern Iraq when he's gone. Tam Diel, the longest-serving member of the House of Commons, is alarmed and wants parliamentary call tomorrow. And many of his Labour colleagues agree the time has come for a proper Commons debate.
You have your discussions before decisions are imminent, not while they're imminent or after a decision has been made at Camp David. If Parliament's to be involved at all, and that is to be anything other than a sort of sham, then Parliament must be involved at the earliest opportunity.
Last night, the International Development Secretary, Claire Short, urged Tony Blair to use his influence wisely over the next few weeks and warned the US of the enormous danger of acting unilaterally. The Prime Minister's spokesman still say that no decisions have been taken and therefore there's no need at this stage to consult Parliament. But they do point out that Tony Blair has promised this week that when the time comes, he will consult the Commons. Gita Hari, BBC News, Downing Street.
Hunting does not keep fox numbers down, according to new research by the RSPCA. The 12-month study carried out during the foot-and-mouth crisis, when fox hunting was banned in the countryside, reveals that the UK fox population stayed constant. The pro-hunting lobby has dismissed the findings. Inner city schools must improve pupil discipline if standards are going to rise, according to a policy document being launched this morning by the Conservatives. Among the proposals is a good behaviour contract that parents would have to sign before their children were allowed to join a school. Head teachers would also be given greater powers to expel disruptive pupils with the abolition of appeal panels. It's not just cigarettes and alcohol that are cheaper across the channel, according to a new report. Savings can also be made on a whole range of other goods. Researchers from Which magazine found big bargains on electrical goods such as TVs, as well as designer glasses, bicycles and household products.
It's widely known that alcohol's cheaper in France and Belgium. That's mainly because duty tax is lower than in the UK. But the shopping trawl by Which researchers found other savings too. They bought a shaver that was £54 cheaper, and a coffee maker cost the same amount less too. They made big savings on a digital camera, on designer specs and an adult's bike. In fact, on 5 items, they saved £339.
Rip off Britain may no longer be a fashionable slogan for UK politicians, but if you're shopping across the channel, even taking the exchange rate into account, then it seems it still holds true.
The findings may come as a surprise to consumers in countries such as Greece, where this week shoppers protested about the introduction of the euro, saying it meant that prices there have been rounded up. No one, it seems, is happy with their lot. Nicola Carslaw, BBC News.
The prison service is accused this morning of not doing enough to prevent inmates from reoffending after they're released. A report by the Public Accounts Committee says too little is being spent on inmates' education while they're serving their sentences. 6 out of 10 prisoners go on to commit a further crime within 2 years of their release. Children starting secondary school are 3 times more likely to be killed or injured on their way to school than primary pupils. The AA says older students usually have to walk further and cross unfamiliar roads on their journey to a new school. They recommend that children be accompanied, even if they are reluctant, at least for the first few weeks of term, until they are familiar with new routes. New computer technology has been developed for surgeons. It is expected to improve safety and accuracy during operations. The equipment, which has been successfully used in a Manchester hospital, allows surgeons to see body scans in 3D and will be particularly useful in the treatment of cancer. The first Ealing comedy for 50 years premiered in London last night. Leicester Square was teeming with people hoping to catch a glimpse of the stars of The Importance of Being Earnest. Dame Judi Dench, who plays Lady Bracknell, was there without a handbag. Rupert Everett made it along as well, but anyone hoping to see Colin Firth in the flesh was disappointed as he was filming in France. There'll be another summary at 30:30, but now back to Sophie and Jeremy.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you very
indeed.
much. It's 8 minutes past 6. Coming up on the programme today.
Go on.
September the 11th, a year on. First of our special reports, we feature the story of Flight 93, which was brought down in a field in Pennsylvania.
We'll also be talking about channel hopping for a cheaper deal, why more British shoppers are cutting costs on the continent.
And after 8 this morning, the chef Rick Stein will be here to tell us about his new series, which is a celebration of British culinary delights. That's hard to say.
At this time of
But
the
they do exist, definitely. Definitely. I've had a look at the book too that goes with it. It's brilliant. Iraq. The US and Britain say no decision has yet been taken on military action against Iraq. But President Bush's comments and the news that Tony Blair is flying to the United States at the weekend suggest a new urgency in the discussions. With the political campaign growing, a military campaign now seems certain within the next 6 months. At the first stage, Britain would probably contribute towards a massive air campaign of up to 2 months. It's thought that stage 2 might involve the use of special forces and limited numbers of ground troops. A big invasion force would take at least 60 days to assemble and seems unlikely. Britain would probably offer special forces and technical support, including tanks and aircraft. The military objective would be to capture or neutralize Saddam Hussein. Well, we're joined now by John Nichol, who's a military analyst and a Gulf War veteran. And John, of course, you and I were in Baghdad during the last Gulf War. I was in rather more
different conditions,
comfortable circumstances than you were. You were a prisoner of war. So what do you think? Are we on the road to war?
I think that if we'd have had this conversation 1 or 2 days ago, I would have said no. I would have said, you know, this is classic brinkmanship. We would have gone to the edge. I think that if you listen to Mr. Bush yesterday and Mr. Blair the day before, the statements that they seem to be making give almost no room for manoeuvre. You know, it's regime change or nothing. And I think we're on a war footing. I think we're heading there.
OK, so when, where and how?
Well, you know, there's been many different options mooted, everything from, you know, a very basic special forces operation that you mentioned there, all the way through to a rerun of the Gulf War from 1991. But you must remember, in 1991, that took nigh on 6 months to build up the 500,000 troops and everybody else that was there. What most people seem to be suggesting is something that's being referred to as Gulf War Light or something like that. They're talking about something in the order of 80,000 troops. Those troops are being built up as we speak. They're actually being moved into place as we speak. A massive air campaign to really try to decimate the military infrastructure, and then almost a 2-3 pronged attack on Baghdad, completely bypassing all of the other major cities. Because what Iraq did in 1991 was leave its forces in the desert, and of course with our superior technology they were simply picked off. Against a power of the magnitude of the United States, of course, the Iraqis don't have a chance. Now, the question is, the real question, I think, is what happens then? What happens when they get to Baghdad? What happens when they get rid of Saddam, as they probably can do? What happens to the country? What happens to the people? I think that the question about whether they could get rid of Saddam is a good question. I think it could be done, but I don't think it's going to be the cakewalk that I've heard some American commentators talk about. You know, in 1991, Iraq had the chemical weapons. We knew then that Iraq had chemical weapons. And James Baker had told Iraq, if you use chemical weapons in the forthcoming war, we will devastate you. What he was saying is we would use nuclear weapons, and we were prepared to do that. Now, this is a different scenario. Saddam is facing his demise. He could go ahead and use those very weapons that we fear so much. That could cause, as you well know, a catastrophic burn-up in the Middle East. But if you put all of that to one side, what are we going to replace Saddam Hussein with? Saudi have actually said that they don't want the regime to be changed. They like the albeit dodgy stability that is there. Iran don't particularly want the Shia Muslims to take over the regime, or the Kurds from the north. And that's the real problem. Just focusing on one man saying replace Saddam Hussein and it'll all be fine and dandy is really not what's going to happen in that area. OK, John Nichol, always good to talk to you. Thanks for coming in this morning.
Well, let's have a look at the papers right now.
Yep.
The Daily Mirror, first of all. Walkies is what they say. That's, oh, wrong camera. Sorry. Daily Mirror, there you go. Walkies is their headline. Bush summons Poodle Blair, they say, to US as a cheerleader for his war on Iraq.
Last chance to avoid war. This is the Guardian's spin on the Bush story. And nice picture of Sheila Hancock there at the memorial service for her late husband, John Thaw.
The Daily Telegraph, Bush says clear course towards war, and again there's Sheila Hancock.
Here's the Mail. Apparently a group of patients have lost their GP surgery because asylum seekers are being given exclusive access to a doctor.
The Independent, with resolve stiffened, Blair will meet Bush for Council of War is their main headline. And down here at the bottom, Morris allows, this is S.L. Morris, the Education Secretary for England, Morris allows unvetted teachers into schools. That's to stop this backlog that we've seen over the past few days.
Have we lost a few papers this morning?
We seem to
be
have
fewer than usual on the desk.
You're responsible for bringing them. Where are they?
Well, I had them when I brought them down here.
Jeremy, your last day and you haven't brought all the papers. Oh,
maybe
my
John
goodness.
pinched them in the green room. I don't know. He's got their own set in there. Here's the Times. War summit for Bush and Blair coming up, and church leaders down there speaking out against a wicked war, and Estelle Morris, the Education Secretary, backing down on teacher vetting. Estelle Morris will be joining us later on this morning.
She will indeed. And the Daily Express, the headline as well, Iraq tanks on the move.
Nearly 6:15, you're watching Breakfast from BBC News. The main stories this morning: schools in England and Wales are this morning calling in staff even if they have not passed security tests following a government U-turn.
President Bush is exploring ways of rallying the United Nations behind his campaign against Iraq.
And shoppers are abandoning rip-off Britain for cheaper deals on the continent.
Also coming up on the programme this morning, crossing the channel, the lengths some people will go to find a bargain.
And I'm in Shanksville, Pennsylvania, where a year ago, Flight 93 crashed into this field just behind me. This morning, we're going to try and find out how ordinary Americans have been affected by September the 11th, 1 year on.
Here's Rob, he's got the sport.
Morning, Jeremy.
Morning.
Sophie, morning to you. 1-1 with 1 to play. That's the exciting situation ahead of the fourth and final end-power test between England and India, which starts today at the Oval. England captain Nasser Hussain has told his players to put thoughts about this winter's Ashes series to one side. The squad is announced on Tuesday. Hussain has let Ronnie O'Reilly return to his county Essex. The remaining place in the starting 11 looks like going to one of Cork, Harmison or Key. Andre Agassi will meet the defending champion Leighton Hewitt in the semi-finals of the US Open after beating Max Mirny of Belarus overnight. He won in 4 sets, as did Hewitt, who beat Younes El Anoui of Morocco. The FA have charged Manchester United's Roy Keane with bringing the game into disrepute on 2 counts. Both charges relate to a tackle on Manchester City's Alf Inge Haaland. Described in Keane's recent autobiography, he has 14 days to respond to the charges. And figures released overnight have revealed that the number of British sportsmen and women falling foul of drug testers has dropped in the last year, though the statistics for Rugby League show that over 6% of results proved positive, way beyond the 1.7% across all sports. We'll have more details on those stories just after the 6:30 news flow.
Rob, thank you very much.
Thanks very much. Bank of England will decide on interest rates today. Will there be a move?
Max Foster can tell us more. He's at the London Stock Exchange. Hello.
Yeah, good morning. Well, the Bank of England's expected to keep interest rates on hold at their 38-year lows of 4%. But there is pressure on them to drop those interest rates because many think consumer spending is slowing, and also some think the housing boom is about to end.
Spending on the high street is still growing, but at a slower rate than earlier this year. In fact, retail spending has stayed relatively high and compensated for a downturn in other sectors, but perhaps not for much longer. Prices of goods in the shops are only rising slowly. Non-food items cost less than 4 years ago. Retailers are calling for a 0.25% cut in interest rates, but they aren't hopeful.
Apart from house prices, which have obviously been a concern to the bank, there is no sector of the economy at the moment where inflation is a problem. You know, the government really has got inflation under control. And therefore we think that the bank needs to look at long-term trends in investment and in job creation and in growth in the economy, and needs to create the conditions for that to happen. And our belief is that interest rates now need to fall a bit.
The housing boom was cited by the MPC last month as the reason it held off cutting rates for fear of stoking house price inflation. But now the property market looks like it's cooling.
A strong housing market underpins the whole consumer sector, no doubt about that, and it's been booming for years, led by London. But London, in my opinion, is now going down, and although house price inflation will stay high and possibly go up outside of London, the overall consumer size in London and the South East is half of the economy, and so the overall figure for consumer spending will soften as the housing market weakens.
Calls from the struggling manufacturing sector for a rate cut have also become deafening. This week, the Engineering Employers Federation reported output and orders falling for the 6th month in a row.
Much of consumer confidence is perception-based, so this week's losses on the stock market will tend to worry them, making them tighten their belts and spend less. And it's this that may make the Bank of England cut interest rates. If not today, then maybe next month. Sarah Lockett, BBC News, the Bank of England.
US federal prosecutors plan to file new charges and may indict new defendants in the WorldCom accounting probe, the largest accounting scandal in US history. It follows not guilty pleas by former WorldCom Chief Financial Officer Scott Sullivan and accounting executive Buffett Yates yesterday. Both men have been accused of securities fraud. Now, accountants and solicitors have been told to watch out for money laundering among their clients. If they don't do that, they could face a jail sentence. The onus really now, under new legislation, is being put on the professionals to notice any money laundering among their clients. And with me this morning is Peter Silk, who's chairman of the Litigation Support Group at the Institute of Chartered Accountants. Hi.
Morning.
You've just been rushed in here. You're probably a bit out of breath. Can you just explain a bit more background to this? Because I gather a solicitor has been jailed. Is that right?
Yes, there's a chap called Jonathan Duff who was jailed last month for money laundering, and effectively he had seen his money, the client.
He knew about the money.
He knew about the money.
But was he turning a blind eye?
Not a blind eye. He was claiming professional privilege. It's a very simple case in that his client was prosecuted for drug-related crimes, And
he was found guilty of that, and the solicitor was in some way effectively found guilty of colluding without actually being involved in the crime.
Well, the money actually came into his client's account as advance fees. He then, he then was asked for the money back by the client, and he gave the money back to him on a cheque, and he put it into his own business account, which is the normal process.
So he was doing a legitimate job as he could see it. He was being paid in a certain way.
And then the client was then prosecuted for criminal activities in drug-related and was jailed for 25 years.
And this sets a precedent then for other accountants and solicitors. They've got to really watch out for any money laundering.
Yes, I think money laundering, which is turning dirty money into clean money, and this is the big problem that everybody's got at this stage of the proceeds. Under the old legislation, we were looking under drugs and criminal and terrorist-related crimes. Now we're looking under the Proceeds of Crime Act, and that's going to bring in any criminal activities at all into the scheme. And that's where solicitors and accountants have got to watch out for in the next 15 or so months as this Act's brought into, the various provisions are brought into occasion, yes.
OK, well, thanks very much for joining us this morning. You got to us in the end. I'll be back in about half an hour where we'll have our usual update of the markets.
Thank you very much. Today we start a series of special reports looking at America 1 year on from September the 11th. The World Trade Center and the Pentagon were at the heart of the attacks last year, but we're starting with the story of Flight 93.
That was the plane on which passengers and crew are thought to have attacked the hijackers. Breakfast's Graham Satchell has been to the quiet town of Shanksville in Pennsylvania, where Flight 93 came down.
Flight 93 was headed for Washington, probably the White House. It never got there. With the now infamous words, "Let's roll," the passengers fought back. They forced the plane to crash here, Shanksville, Pennsylvania. This is small-town America. The people of Shanksville describe it themselves as a place that time forgot in the middle of nowhere. Dutch, the oldest man in town, whiles away the hours on his porch, talking to anyone who happens to pass by. The sign says it's a friendly little town, but there's also an edginess here. It's overtly patriotic. The American flag is everywhere. It's a place forever in the shadow of tragedy.
It's something that you think about every day. Even a year later, you don't get out of bed without thinking about Flight 93.
Terry Schaefer was the first to get the call. It was 10:06 on September the 11th.
I arrived to find that there was literally nothing that we could do, that there wasn't a piece bigger than the hood of a car left of the plane. Everything else had just exploded and then broken up into very fine bits. It's something that we'll long remember here, the fellows in the fire station that responded that day.
A traffic jam in rural Pennsylvania, less than a mile from Shanksville. They come to see what remains of Flight 93. Not much is the answer, just another flag. And this is the temporary memorial to Flight 93. Really, it's little more than a car park, but every day hundreds of ordinary Americans come from all over the country to leave their thoughts and mementos and to read what other people have written.
I thought they were really brave and courageous, and they showed the American spirit of love for country and family.
I think it changed America. We're not as naive, not as innocent as we used to be, and that's unfortunate for these kids because the America I grew up in is not what it is today.
Some things, of course, haven't changed. Most Americans still believe in God, still go to church.
And thank you, God, again for Bob and for the way...
But in many ways, the old certainties have been shattered. Here in Shanksville, they worry about national security, about flying. They look over their shoulder and wonder if September the 11th will happen again.
Americans have always felt, like we've got it all. We know what we're doing. Who can touch us? Well, we found out the hard way.
Jerry and Bea Guadagno thought nothing could touch their family, certainly not terrorism. In a quiet cemetery in Trenton, New Jersey, they tend the grave of their only son. Richard Guadagno had flown to New Jersey for his grandmother's 100th birthday. It was September the 10th. The next day, he flew home on Flight 93.
All I want to see him come in that door and hear that call, "Hi, Mom," which I will never hear again. That, to me, has been taken away. There's a hole in our hearts that will never be replaced.
The story of Flight 93. On tomorrow's programme, Graham will be looking at how children who lost a parent in the September the 11th attacks have coped in the past year.
Yeah, what's on your mind this morning? Do you have thoughts about September the 11th, the anniversary, first anniversary of that coming up? That's our details, as usual, on the screen. Email us, text us, phone us. Many, many choices.
You do indeed. We're reading them as they come in right now. Lots already saying goodbye to Mr. Bowen.
Yeah, well, thank you for those.
Right now, the weather with Carol. Good morning.
Good morning. It's quite a pleasant old start to the day this morning for many of us, although we have got some rain coming in from the west. Now, if you're travelling further afield today, there's still a lot of sunshine to be had in many parts of Europe. Through Iberia, for example, although you could well catch a shower round about the Costa Brava. You could also catch a shower really anywhere around the Mediterranean, but the further east that you are, and in the northeast, there's plenty of sunshine on offer, with Moscow enjoying a high today of 25. Now, back at home, if you're staying here for the next few days, it's looking a wee bit more unsettled. Tomorrow, some showers, and it's going to be windy, and for the weekend some blustery showers, and it will feel cooler by then. The temperature is likely to dip a couple of degrees or so. But this morning we have got some rain around. You can see it coming into the west on the radar picture. The brighter colours telling us where the heaviest bursts have been, and in fact if we zoom into Scotland you can see exactly where it has been lately, extending really from the far northwest all the way through western Scotland down into Northern Ireland as well. Moving to the other end of the country, we've got some patchy fog problems this morning too. Again, for the south of England and East Anglia, with visibility as low as 100 metres in some places. So of course that means tricky travelling conditions, but it should clear as we go through the next few hours. So this morning, when that goes, for many of us it will be quite a pleasant start to the day. Again, some bright spells of some sunshine. The cloud and rain in the west will continue to push southeastwards, and it will become a weakening feature as it does, although there may well be one or two heavy bursts, say around lunchtime, in parts of central Scotland and maybe western Scotland as well. And as it continues through the lunchtime period into the afternoon, behind it will tend to brighten up. In the southeastern corner it should stay largely dry, but there is a risk of a shower in East Anglia and Kent, and the highest temperatures once again will be in the south. That's it from me. Back to Sophie and Jeremy.
Coming up, the length some people will go to find a bargain. The channel-hopping shoppers, say that quickly if you can, who go to the continent for cheaper goods.
6:30 in the morning.
Channel-hopping shoppers.
Channel-hopping shoppers. Right now, let's join our news teams across the UK.
Good morning, I'm Michael Colley. Now the main news, travel and weather here in the Midlands. Campaigners opposing plans to expand Birmingham International Airport have hailed a meeting held last night as a success. Hundreds of people from the Solihull area gathered at Catherine de Barnes Village Hall. An action group has been set up to represent the views of residents. A number of people expressed fears about vast areas of land disappearing and increased noise pollution. A stretch of the M6 motorway reopened in the early hours of this morning following a crash which killed 4 people yesterday. Last night, one carriageway northbound near Keele between junctions 12 and 13 remained closed. A lorry crashed through the central reservation just before midday yesterday, ploughing into the path of vehicles travelling in the opposite direction. The international human rights group Amnesty is calling for the immediate release of a group of suspected British terrorists. They're being held by the US at Guantanamo Bay in Cuba. The group contains 3 men from Tipton in the West Midlands. The charity claims they're being routinely denied the right to lawyers and face trial by the military. A woman jailed for failing to move a fence from inside her neighbour's land is taking her case to the Court of Appeal in London today. 26-year-old Samantha Richards from Shropshire, seen here on the left, refused to take down the fence despite numerous court orders. She was imprisoned for 3 months by Birmingham County Court. Finally, it was promised to be one of the Midlands' most dazzling shopping centres, and it appears to have lived up to many people's expectations. Touchwood Shopping Centre in Solihull is celebrating its first anniversary today. It's had over 16 million visitors since last September and has been named the UK Retail Destination of the Year. That's it for now. Back to Sophie and Jeremy in London.
Go on then.
Good morning. Breakfast from BBC News coming up in just a few minutes. She wants me to do all the talking.
It's your last day. You're not going to be able to do this anymore, are you?
Yeah, well,
Ever again.
After 2 years of telling me to shut up, you're telling me to do all the talking. Cricket. England won, India won with a final test remaining. We'll have all the latest from the Oval.
I could go home right now, couldn't I? And go back to bed and watch you from home. Fantastic. Right now, Kate with the summary of this morning's main news. Hello.
Hello, thank you. Good morning. Schools in England and Wales will be trying to contact staff today to tell them to come into work, even though security checks on their background aren't complete. More than 7,000 checks still have to be carried out by the Criminal Records Bureau. But last night, the Education Secretary, Estelle Morris, changed her mind about enforcing the vetting policy because of the disruption it's causing. In the United States, President Bush is considering seeking a UN Security Council resolution that will set a deadline for weapons inspections to begin against Iraq. President Bush will try to persuade the Security Council to come up with a new resolution which allows for strikes if weapons inspections aren't resumed. Hunting does not keep fox numbers down, according to new research by the RSPCA. The 12-month study carried out during the foot-and-mouth crisis, when fox hunting was banned in the countryside, reveals that the UK fox population stayed constant. The pro-hunting lobby has dismissed the findings. Inner city schools must improve pupil discipline if standards are going to rise. That's according to a policy document being launched this morning by the Conservatives. Among the proposals is a good behaviour contract that parents would have to sign before their children were allowed to join a school. Head teachers would also be given greater powers to expel disruptive pupils with the abolition of appeal panels. Children starting secondary school are 3 times more likely to be killed or injured on their way to school than primary pupils. The AA says older students usually have to walk further and cross unfamiliar roads on their journey to a new school. They recommend that children are accompanied, even if they're reluctant, at least for the first few weeks of term, until they're familiar with new routes. New computer technology has been developed for surgeons. It's expected to improve safety and accuracy during operations. The equipment, which has been successfully used in a Manchester hospital, allows surgeons to see body scans in 3D and will be particularly useful in the treatment of cancer. The first Ealing comedy for 50 years premiered in London last night. Leicester Square was teeming with people hoping to catch a glimpse of the stars of The Importance, I should say. Dame Judi Dench, who plays Lady Bracknell, was there. Rupert Everett made it along as well. But anyone hoping to see Colin Firth in the flesh was disappointed, as he was filming in France. That's all for now. Back to Jeremy and Sophie.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. What's the time? 6:33. Coming up, channel hopping for a cheaper deal. Why British consumers cross to the continent to cut costs.
Disruption in schools. We're going to be talking to the Education Secretary for England, Estelle Morris. She will explain why she has relaxed the system on teacher checks.
And the galloping gardener, Alan Titchmarsh, will be here to talk about his new book called Trowel and Error.
It's very racy. The front page. Ooh, front cover.
I think for Alan's legions of fans out there, there's
I'll
some
tell you.
treats in store.
Let's have a look at the sport now with Rob Bonnet. Hello.
Sophie, good morning. Jeremy too. A late start in early September, the latest ever in England, incidentally, for today's 4th and final Empire Test against India. The series balanced excitingly at 1-1 and both sides with much to prove. India haven't won a series away from their subcontinent in 16 years. England have a frantic, almost uninterrupted schedule ahead with the Champions Trophy, the Ashes series and then the World Cup.
India have become so at home in England, they've even found a use for London's many traffic cones. Sourav Ganguly's approaching something that's eluded so many of his predecessors, winning a series outside Asia. After 16 years of trying, it's now a familiar burden.
I think there's pressure on both the sides. Nasser will be trying to win at home because he's going for a tough tour after this to Australia, where there's a lot of focus on England. And obviously we'll also be trying to win because it will be a major win for us. So I think there's pressure on both the sides.
There's no escaping the next challenge for England. For this winter's Ultimate Series in Australia, the team need to generate momentum by beating India here.
Yeah, obviously if you turn up in Australia having just won a series, you'll be full of confidence. 4 years ago, we'd just beaten South Africa. We were full of confidence. Unfortunately, we came here and played Sri Lanka on a turning wicket and came unstuck. So we didn't leave for Australia last time in the best of spirits. If you can do what we say, then it'd be brilliant and bring the Ashes back home. But I just haven't said what year.
Well, there's serious concern Michael Vaughan's knee might not be up to this trip to Australia. Marcus Trescothick's thumb is still heavily protected. Hussain's England will end their longest summer battered and bruised, but with victory still in reach. Joe Wilson, BBC News at the Oval.
And we'll have the former England bowler Angus Fraser talking to us live from the Oval just after the 7:30 news. On to tennis now. Leighton Hewitt, the defending champion, beat Younes El Anoui of Morocco in 4 sets in the US Open quarter-finals last night, and will meet Andre Agassi for a place in the final at Flushing Meadows. Agassi was also taken to 4 sets by Max Mirny of Belarus. The 6th seed is bidding for his 3rd win at Flushing Meadows, but will clearly face a tough task against Hewitt, who's on a 23-match winning streak against American players. There's the continuing prospect of yet another Williams sisters final after Venus joins Serena in the last 4 with a straight sets win over Monica Seles. Venus now meets Amélie Mauresmo after the Frenchwoman beat Jennifer Capriati. Well, no surprise, I suppose, that Manchester United's Roy Keane has been charged by the Football Association on 2 counts of bringing the game into disrepute. Keane's effectively in the dock for a tackle on Manchester City's Alf-Inge Haaland. That Keane has conceded himself was the subject of a vendetta. He was sent off afterwards, but there's also the business of writing about it in his recently published autobiography for financial reward. Keane has 14 days to answer the charge, but he's also undergone a hip operation and is expected to be out of action for at least 6 weeks. Well, it's live now to Manchester and to Andy Walsh of the Manchester United Independent Supporters Association. Morning to you, Andy. Keane is pretty much banged to rights on both counts, isn't he?
Well, I don't think the FA were left with much choice really, other than to place the charges. But having said that, I think it would be might unfair if the FA then try Roy Keane twice for something which took place so long ago. You know, they had the opportunity to discipline Keane for that fact, for the tackle, and they gave him punishment at the time, and they shouldn't be punishing him again for the same crime.
This is the double jeopardy argument, isn't it? There are those also who argue that the ban should be actually suspended until he's fit again.
Well, yeah, again we see people calling for different treatment for Manchester United players than's been handed out to players of other clubs. This is something which goes on in football all the time. It may be something that the FA want to look at after the Roy Keane incident, but I don't think their own rules and regulations allow them to do it for this particular disciplinary procedure.
I saw a banner at Old Trafford on Tuesday. It said Cantona 95, Beckham 98, Keane 2002. Do you think United fans can look at this Roy Keane story objectively at all?
I think we can actually. Obviously, football is not a sport which lends itself easily to objectivity, but as fans, we're going to get behind Keane in the same way as we did Cantona and Beckham on those dates that you referred to. But as fans as well, we also look at what happens elsewhere in the game, and the FA's responsibility is to make sure the rules are applied equally, and that Roy Keane isn't treated any differently just because he's Roy Keane or just because he plays for Manchester United and it's a high-profile case.
Andy, can I just ask you a question? Are you an England fan?
I'm not actually, no.
Oh, well, in that case, my next question, as sense was redundant, but it's about the Paul Scholes story. I mean, what's your take on the fact that he played on Tuesday against Middlesbrough, but had been withdrawn from the England squad for the friendly against Portugal on Saturday?
Well, I can only go off what Alex Ferguson said, and that is that he wanted to have the strongest team possible out against Middlesbrough, and therefore Paul Scholes was pulled out the sickness room a little bit early, and he was put on, and you see that happen all the time. You know, players come back to get that extra edge of match fitness, so they'll play part of a game. Paul Scholes played something like 60-70 minutes or something the other night, but he may not be fit to play a full match on a Saturday and go through the rigorous training programme that Sven Eriksson will be having for his players in the lead-up to that game.
OK, Andy Walsh, thank you very much indeed for joining us from Manchester. A club before country there for Andy Walsh. Well, an encouraging result from Scotland's under-21 side ahead of their opening 2004 European qualifying match against the Faroe Islands, which is on Saturday. The youngsters beat Israel 2-1. They got off to the perfect possible start. Celtic's Sean Maloney giving them the lead after just 4 minutes. Israel equalised before substitute John Kennedy scored Scotland's winner, also from a corner. A memorable night for Kennedy, who was making his under-21 debut. Good news then for Scotland. So, as I say, live from the Oval at 7:30.
Rob, thanks very much. Well, cigarettes and alcohol, they're not the only goods which cost less across the Channel. The Consumer Association, which discovered evidence of a rip-off Britain when it compared our prices on a whole range of goods with those on the continent.
And the editor of Which magazine joins us in a moment to talk about this. But first, let's hear from some cross-channel shoppers that we caught up with yesterday, who told us why they are buying in France.
We've got beer, wine, spirits, cigarettes. Probably some spirits. Beer, perfume on the ship.
It's cheaper to go to France for the day than it is to go to London for the day. And we can bring back some nice wine and that as well.
The pound's going down, the euro's going up, so it's not as really as competitive as it used to be. So before time, you could actually get more for your money, you're not anymore.
We've been told lots of people get washing powder, and I know it's a funny thing to say, and that's not the reason why I came, but washing powder's cheaper, so we bought some.
Well, I'm joined by Helen Parker, who's the editor of Which magazine. Are you surprised by the findings of this?
Not really. I mean, at Which we've been highlighting for a long time that prices can be much higher in the UK than in other countries. I think what people might be surprised by this is the range of things that they can buy cheaper abroad. I mean, this was focusing really on cross-channel shopping. 15 million of us go through Calais each year, huge number, and we're probably getting more used to shopping abroad than we have done in the past. But we were picking up things like designer spectacle frames for £40 cheaper, espresso makers £60 cheaper, men's shavers £50 cheaper, a bike £150 cheaper than you could buy here.
Big savings.
So these are big savings, absolutely.
Big savings. It's worth going. Why is it? Why does this happen? With cigarettes and alcohol, people blame the Chancellor, booze and fags duties and so on.
Sure.
But what about shavers or specs?
I don't think there's any one simple answer. I mean, with something like cars, which we weren't particularly looking at in the survey, but something we've looked at in detail in the past, that's an area where we've often said we think the market just doesn't work properly for consumers in this country. With these other areas, it's difficult to pin down any one reason, but what is absolutely clear from this is there are big savings to be had. It wasn't an absolutely consistent picture, so there were some areas, washing machines, fridges, it's actually difficult to compare there, but they didn't seem to be any cheaper.
So, I mean,
things
are there
like laptops and scanners, not particularly cheaper.
But are there things that are actually cheaper here? Or are we're just paying more than everybody else?
Well, what we did find was that you could match some of the cheaper prices here by shopping online. So if people are sort of growing in their confidence in terms of buying online, then there are savings to be made that you can buy by buying in the UK and not having to travel abroad. But certainly a wide range of things there, and as people, whatever you think about the euro, one advantage is that you can at least compare prices very, very simply across European countries. So all of that works for the benefit of consumers, I think.
Are there actual figures, government figures or something like that about different cost of livings in different countries?
There are various prices. It's difficult to compare this kind of thing, though, through those surveys. What there are, though, from a shopper's point of view, some very useful surveys online. A couple of websites, Eurotunnel, actually at eurotunnel.com, has an excellent price surveys online. Places like daytripper.net as well, very useful surveys. So you can do quite a bit of research yourself before you head off and actually take the details of what you're after and really see whether you can find what you're after.
Can you envisage a time when all the prices come down to here to sort of match the ones in France, for example?
It would be great, wouldn't it? I think the more people are prepared to buy, to search out these bargains, the more they're prepared to perhaps buy online in this country to search out the bargains and buy them. I think that all that competitive pressure can only help to drive down prices here.
Helen Parker, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. It's nearly 6:45 and you're watching Breakfast from BBC News. The main stories this morning: schools in England and Wales are this morning calling in staff even if they haven't passed security tests following a government U-turn.
President Bush is exploring ways of rallying the United Nations behind his campaign against Iraq.
And shoppers are abandoning rip-off Britain for cheaper deals on the continent.
Interest rates are at a 38-year low, but will that change today? Max Foster is at the London Stock Exchange. What's the feeling there, Max?
Well, the Bank of England's meeting today will know by lunchtime what their decision is, and the feeling really in the city is that interest rates are going to be kept on hold at about 4%. But calls for a rate cut are growing. Manufacturers and retailers are putting pressure on the rate setters. CBI figures yesterday showed the worst retail sales data for 2 years, and there are signs of cooling in the housing market as well. We've had some news this morning from the finance house, Zurich Financial. It's cutting 4,500 jobs. We don't know much more about that at the moment, but the cuts will be across Europe. We're not clear exactly where the cuts will be and whether Britain at all will be affected. Now, the Prudential has become the latest insurer to cut its payouts on its with-profits policies. Around 2 million people will be affected, and it'll apply to those with Prudential and Scottish Amicable policies. Investors could end up with thousands of pounds less than they're expecting after the Pru announced it'll be reducing payouts by between 5 and 10%. With-profit policies aim to smooth out stock market volatility throughout the course of an investment by holding back some of the gains in good years to cushion savers in poor years. But the stock market turmoil of recent years has eroded funds, forcing a string of insurers, including Norwich Union and Friends Provident, to slash payouts. Now, Philip Green, who turned around BHS, is due to announce a few more details about his latest project today. Green has offered 408 pence a share in a takeover bid for Arcadia, the group which owns Dorothy Perkins, Evans and Wallace. But Arcadia said it'll only consider Green's bid once it was sure he could deliver the deal. Reports suggest that Green is now ready to allay any fears that Arcadia may have about financing. Now, Orange is changing the way it charges its customers. Basically, you'll be able to decide what services you want. You'll also be able to opt out of the services that you don't want. So, at the moment, most plans have a monthly tariff which includes line rental plus, say, the cost of calls and text messages. Under Orange's Your Plan, you'll be billed individually for each service you use. So you could end up with a string of charges, not just for phone calls, but for things like text messaging, which will be treated as an entirely separate service. Now, to explain all this, I'm joined by John Allwood. He's the Executive Vice President for Orange UK. Marketing gimmick is this? I mean, what's the thinking behind this? There is a lot of confusion about the tariffs at the moment, that's admitted, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, there's over 60 different tariffs out there in the marketplace, and we looked at this and decided that it was essential that we made life simple for customers. So we're bringing in one simple tariff plan for all our contract customers, and this will begin at the beginning of October.
The cynical view is that you'll be able to break down all the costs instead of giving one large cost. So you could start kind of edging up the prices of text messaging, even if it's very slightly, but it won't be as noticeable if you're only charging for text messaging in one bit of the bill.
Well, I think that people will buy bundles of text messages and they'll get a third off the price of a standard text message if they buy that particular bundle.
But they have to stick to the bundle. What if they go over the bundle? Will you charge them an awful lot for going over there?
No, if they go out of the bundle, there's a very clear, transparent price of 10p a text message, and indeed if you go out of a bundle for a voice call, again there's a very transparent price that you can see. So transparency and simplicity are the two main things that lie behind this.
And I presume this is something to do with the launch of 3G services, so because you can have a lot more services available on phones.
There will be a lot more services, and certainly, whilst this isn't specifically linked to 3G, one of the bundles you'll be able to buy is a content bundle, so there will be no question that you don't know what you're paying. There'll be a flat rate to basically get all the information and all the services you want, the richer life services that 3G will help deliver.
Okay, thanks for joining me this morning. We'll see how it goes, see how the experiment works, see if anyone else decides it's a success and decides to take it up as well. Now, nearly half of all employers recruit workers across the internet, apparently. As companies trim their budgets, online recruitment seems to make sense, as it saves money on advertising. So says the Recruitment Confidence Index, which carried out the survey. The number of firms going online to fill vacancies has trebled, apparently, over the last 3 years. A quick look at the markets then, and a much more positive day yesterday on the markets. The FTSE was down, but only slightly. It's been fluttering around this 4,000 point for some time now. It's actually above it at the moment, so that's a good confidence factor. In New York, the Dow was up. Some quite positive news, but a lot of speculation about what's going to happen now. September is traditionally the worst month for equities, and we've also got September the 11th coming up, so some subdued feelings, certainly in New York. In New York as well, the Nasdaq was up slightly. The Nikkei is up. Some positive news from their 19-year lows yesterday, and these are the currencies, and you can see those for yourself. I'll be back a bit later.
Thank you very much
for that. Do you want to email us?
We've got loads of emails already, actually, from all your avid fans who don't want you to go. And
I'm so touched by all of them, actually, and there have been lots.
Hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds. In fact, I have used some of them. You will see why later on. If you can possibly stay tuned. I know you don't know anything about this. If you can possibly stay tuned till the 9 o'clock, or just before 9 o'clock, you'll find out why. But they have all gone to very good use. Ian Buchanan says, is Sophie wearing black for Jeremy's last day? Good luck, Jeremy. I am, actually. I decided I'd wear black in honour of you.
Morning, you know, we've both got things to celebrate. We're moving on to new chapters in our lives. And I've actually wore this shirt, my first ever breakfast I presented at the end of 1997, which is a long time ago.
1997.
In Jerusalem.
Yes, you did, and you you chose that.
And you were out in the rain.
I was out in the rain.
In Bethlehem, I was in the dry.
And look at us now.
Yeah.
It's
older.
Older.
Wiser.
Tireder. More tired.
Definitely tireder. More tired?
More tired.
Carol Kirkwood's always wise, never tired.
Hello. And it's a beautiful old start to the day here in London, Jeremy. You can just see the sun there through the pillars of Television Centre. It's really lovely. It's not particularly cold either. There's just a gentle breeze affecting us. Now, if we take a look at other parts of the country, Leeds this morning is looking very nice as well. Some nice blue skies to be had here. But as we move down to Tunbridge Wells, it's quite a misty old start to the day. Again, we're looking at poor visibility, not just in Tunbridge Wells, but in other parts. Here in London, though, we don't thankfully have that problem, certainly not at the moment. And as I mentioned, it does feel quite nice. But if you are heading out early on this morning, as I mentioned, we've got some mist and some patchy fog around. Visibility in some parts of the country is as low as 100 metres. And I'm talking specifically here about southern England and also East Anglia too. So then this morning we've got some rain affecting western parts of Scotland, heading down into Northern Ireland. The brightest colours are telling you where the heaviest bursts have been. So for example, most lately, round about Fort William. So if you're travelling, that's just something else to bear in mind this morning. So the mist and fog should disperse fairly readily over the next couple of hours. And then for many of us, again, it's a final start to the day with some pleasant sunshine, or at least sunny intervals coming through. But that band of rain that we've just looked at on the radar will be progressively pushing southwards and eastwards. So by lunchtime, you might catch some heavy bursts in it, for example, through parts of the Highlands, heading over to the Grampians. And then it's going to be continuing its journey, heading down probably to the northeast of England and Wales by evening time. But it is going to be fairly light and patchy by comparison to what we've got now by that time. Ahead of it, again, generally a dry, fine day with some brightness or sunny intervals, but there is the risk of a shower through East Anglia and Kent. And behind the main rain band, once again, it looks like things will improve, some brighter weather, but still some showers, and the winds strengthening, maybe gale force winds out to the far northwest of Scotland. Temperatures today peaking at about 23 degrees Celsius, that's 73 Fahrenheit in London, and that will actually feel quite nice. Now, we've got the cricket on today, of course, at the Oval. It's the fourth test, England against India. Again, it should stay largely dry, but we'll see the cloud encroach as we go through the course of the afternoon, and it should feel quite pleasantly mild as well. This evening and tonight, our front that's bearing the rain will be continuing its journey southwards, eventually moving into southern parts of England and Wales, and it's not going to be a particularly cold night for most of us, although in some rural areas, temperatures could dip down as low as about 7 degrees Celsius. That's it from me for now. Back to Sophie and Jeremy.
Carol, thank you very much. Actually, very quickly, Jeremy, because I meant to ask you this a moment ago. Yeah. Everybody's asking why you're going. I know you've told us a lot of times.
Why am I going?
Yes.
Well, I'm going because
it's not because you're fed up with working with me, of course.
No, well, you're leaving anyway. I'm going because I'm writing a couple of books, and I'm going to go back and do some reporting abroad next year. There's a lot happening in the world, and it seems a shame not to be part of it.
It does indeed.
And I'm going to do a little bit of presenting here and there as well.
And you don't want to get up at 3 o'clock in the morning anymore?
There is an hour's issue, certainly, but that's not the, that's not the main. I'm used to it.
I know.
We finish work at 9.
We do indeed. Anyway.
We can stagger around London in a catatonic state of tiredness for the next 12 hours.
We'll talk about that a little bit more later on. Right now, 6 minutes to 7 in Duncan Smith spelt out his policy on Iraq at the weekend. He said it wasn't a question of whether we deal with Saddam Hussein, but how and when. And now that Tony Blair is flying out to America this weekend for talks with George Bush, we'll be asking the leader of the opposition whether he will be backing Blair.
Yes, IDS will be with us here in the studio. Now let's join our news teams across the UK.
Good morning, I'm Michael Colley. Campaigners opposing plans to expand Birmingham International Airport have hailed a meeting held last night as a success. Hundreds of people from the Solihull area turned out at Catherine de Barnes to express their concerns. As a result, an action group called Solihull Opposing Additional Runways has been formed. Alison Marsh reports.
It's the first opportunity the people of Solihull have had to come together to discuss plans for the expansion of Birmingham Airport. And they came in their hundreds to the village hall in Catherine de Barnes last night. One of the options is to build a huge new runway to accommodate increasing passenger numbers. Good news for the airlines, but not so good for residents.
People don't realise, I think, maybe what we're looking at in Solihull by 2030. We're looking at something approaching a Heathrow.
Down the road in Warwickshire, action groups have already been formed. They vow to fight plans to build a massive new airport near Rugby. Now it's the turn of people in Solihull. Organisers are forming an action group there to make sure their towns and villages won't be lost to the airport's expansion.
A stretch of the M6 motorway reopened in the early hours of this morning following a crash which killed 4 people yesterday. A lorry crashed through the central reservation near Keele just before midday, ploughing into the path of vehicles travelling in the opposite direction. A funeral service takes place today for one of the police officers who died while trying to stop a van that had been chased from Birmingham to Leicestershire. PC Andrew Munn and his colleague PC Brian Moore were killed as the white van ploughed into their patrol car near Ashby de la Zouche. A man from Acox Green in Birmingham is charged with murder. A woman jailed for failing to take a fence down inside her neighbour's land will be taking her case to the Court of Appeal in London today. 26-year-old Samantha Richards from Shropshire was imprisoned after a 4-year dispute. Sharina Saga has more.
Tranquility Cottage in Hopesay in Shropshire. It looks quiet, but a row over the garden fence landed Samantha Richards behind bars. Miss Richards and her mother, who are featured in a BBC documentary, put up a fence alongside their home. Their neighbour, Tony Benson, claimed it was a metre inside his boundary. His claim was upheld in court. But Samantha Richards refused to take down the fence, despite numerous court orders. As a result, she was jailed for 3 months at the beginning of August this year. Mr Benson spent £30,000 in legal costs. The dispute for him may be over, but the battle continues for the Richards. Samantha Richards will appear at the Court of Appeal in London later today to try and get her sentence reduced.
Travel news now, and there's a broken down lorry on the M6 southbound at Junction 6. Watch for that, it's in lane 1. And we've got sheep on the road on the B4202 near Aberley in Worcestershire. Now here's David with the Midlands weather forecast.
Good morning to you. There's a bit of mist around first thing this morning, but not the sort of fog problems we had yesterday. And it should be essentially a dry story, but there is a weather front moving down from the northwest. That's the one that's going to move into the Midlands later on through the morning and more especially this afternoon, bringing with it some outbreaks of rain, and that rain will be with us into the evening as well. So to start the day, a bright, dry start, not a huge amount of sunshine, very hazy the sunshine if we do see it, and just the outside chance of some of the cloud floating around, thick enough to give the odd light shower, but essentially a dry story. But then come the afternoon, we'll find a bit more cloud coming through. By this evening, that'll bring some persistent rain across us. Temperature-wise, 19 or 20, I think, will be our best figure. 20 in Gloucester, 20 in Coventry, around 18 or 19 degrees up towards Stoke and Shrewsbury. The outlook for the next few days, well, tomorrow, sunshine and showers. Into the weekend, those showers continue. And for all of us, really, it's going to feel somewhat cooler and fresher. Bye for now.
Thanks, David. Finally, Midlands fire brigades are today calling for legislation over the installation of liquefied petroleum gas, or LPG, conversions to fuel cars. To find out more about this and the explosive consequences of ill-fitted systems, tune in to Midlands Today, BBC One, 6:30 this evening. And I'll have more Midlands news in half an hour.
Witness the events of September the 11th from the perspective of the firefighters. An exclusive documentary, 9/11, Wednesday at 8:30 on BBC One.
Hello and welcome to Breakfast from BBC News with Jeremy Bowen and Sophie Rayworth.
It's just coming up to 7 on Thursday, the 5th of September.